Hi folks, so today I wanted to get started on addressing some of the issues on the body. I'm not going to give this thing too much love because it's a very thin body and it's plywood and it's super heavy. It's got a lot of things just against it, but I thought I could use it to show a couple of techniques to get rid of certain imperfections. I'm not going to get rid of them all, like I said, but there's a few that I want to address. This scratch here, I'm going to see if I can take that down some. It's pretty deep. I've got a small ding there. And another one here. This one is the most severe, but it's really deep and it's a crack. So I think I can hide it, but I'm not going to make it go away completely. Those are the main things. I think I'll probably also dowel and fill a couple of holes on the pick guard, maybe the strap button holes, because somebody used some really big screws in one of these two strap buttons. So I'll re-drill those or dowel and re-drill those and start over. The bridge seemed fine. Everything else seemed fine. I don't have a back plate, so I'll probably leave those alone. I may drill these out bigger because on a Strat, the neck screws are supposed to pass freely through the body, just barely. So I'll probably drill those through. So let's start with some easy things first. I'm going to start with this body thing. So I think I showed my numbered drill trick yesterday, but basically what I want to do is create a hole that's just barely bigger than the diameter of these screws that go through the neck plate. Normally on a Fender that's just a 3/16 hole. On this guitar, these screws are 0.202 inches. Let's try another one. Yeah, 0.202. So, let's see. Get my numbered drills out. So a 7 is a 201, a 13/64 is a 203, a 6 is a 204, a 5 is a 205, and a 4 is a 209. Let's see what I've got here. I think I'm going to go with the 4. this works. Sometimes I like to start the bit in reverse just to kick off a little bit of the finish that may be around the hole. Once you get by the finish, you can start drilling it forward without cracking it. If you're wondering why I wouldn't use a drill press there, I think it's a little bit of overkill. I can hold that drill straight, and the existing drill bit, or the existing hole, is going to guide the drill bit fairly straight. So I'm not that worried about straightness, and it's not a critical hole to get that straight anyway. Okay. Yeah, that's much better. That's where I want to be. So now, the neck plate goes back on. These will just pass straight through to the neck. And the body just gets sandwiched. So the next thing I want to try to address is this crack slash dent slash chip in the finish on this edge. It's on the back of the guitar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but since there's a significant hole there, I want to try to fill that. One of the things that I like to use is on a black guitar, or on a guitar that I can find a good match for, is just a regular craft paint pen, and I like to fill the base layer with color with these. This is an oil base. It's compatible with this polyester finish, but basically the first thing I like to do is get color on the exposed wood. Okay, well, that is going to take a while to dry, so I'll have to come back to this, but the basic process is going to be, I'll wait for that to dry. I'll sand lightly sand any of this paint pen that got over the edges of that fill off, and then I'm going to try to stabilize the crack and fill the divot with super glue, and when you sand that super glue smooth, it'll be a shiny and invisible part of the finish. The next thing I want to try to address on this body are a lot of scuffs around the base where somebody didn't use a guitar stand, and some scuffs here on the back that are just buckle rash. I use a block and a piece of wet sandpaper for this, and I've been soaking this wet sandpaper here for weeks. You can get by with soaking paper for a few hours, but most people say leave it overnight. Basically, a little block, about this size, is something that's pretty versatile and easy to work with versus a big auto body block. I use a block of wood. You may want to try something that has a little bit more give to it, like a block of wood with a little like rubber on the one side of it. And you may also want to use a plastic block or something that doesn't have the capability of soaking up water, but this has always worked fine for me, and to each his own. This paper is 1200 grit. I'm starting here to see if it will remove the bulk of the scratches, because if it will, I can buff out the 1200 grit scratch marks without having to resand with a lower grit. Still see a lot of them, so I'm going to keep going. It does make me nervous to sand too close to the edge. I don't want to sand through the edge of the finish, but that's where a lot of those marks are, unfortunately. That's actually looking pretty good. I need to get a little deeper in this area. And there's a small area of missing paint there. I'm probably going to leave that. Okay, a little more. This one is really kind of deep. The more I feel it, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to get that out, but I'm going to try. So I've been at this a while. I've sanded the entire thing to 1200. I went back and did some 600 over that spot. Then I went back and did some 400. And I know I'm going backwards here, but I was just trying to see if I could get that out, and I can't. So I'm going to show you the old super glue trick and fill this small scratch with super glue, and hopefully that makes it disappear. I did chase the the lines in the scratch with the X-Acto knife just slightly because I think it had some dirt in it. And now we're down to just a white scratch, which doesn't go all the way through the color coat. And so I should be able to hide it. If not, I just won't show you this part of the video. Okay, so I need to let that dry. I think, you can speed up the process of drying super glue. You can do it with an accelerator in a can or a bottle, or you can do it with baking soda. In my experience, baking soda makes it really cloudy, so I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to let it air dry. Accelerators have a tendency to create some whiteness or some haziness as well, so I just don't want to use that. I'm going to let this dry for a little while and then I'll come back. It's a very thin coat. It shouldn't take very long, and I've got some other issues on this body that I can sand in the meantime. So back to the front of this body. I'm going to try to finish up these two small scratch repairs there. Like I did before, I chased these with, well, I sanded first, chased them with an X-Acto knife, and then I cleaned it all out and filled the low spots with super glue. This is a trick I like to use with the razor blade to get the surface level before I start sanding. So what I do is take a razor blade, and then I take a little bit of cellophane tape, and I wrap each end of it in tape, leaving the middle exposed. There's no right amount or wrong amount to leave exposed, but I just leave enough to make sure that I can cover the entire repaired area. And what we're going to do, I might need to zoom this in a little bit more if I can. What we're going to do is scrape along the surface of the super glue, and because the tape is here, it's going to keep the razor blade from digging into the rest of the finish. So I'll try to do this one-handed so you can see it. And I'll come at it from different angles, trying to get down to the level of the scratch. And I'll do both of these. These were very, very thin repairs, so there's really not much to scrape. Yeah, okay. So that's the basics. Now, the other thing I like to do is do a little strip sanding. And let me just grab a couple of pieces of sandpaper. So what I've done here is I've taken some 600 grit sandpaper and I've cut it into strips. And basically, this little trick is that you take this strip of sandpaper, and not a massive amount of sandpaper, because I just want to sand a spot. And if I just want to sand that spot, I will put the sandpaper down on that spot, push the tip of my finger down just directly over that spot, and then pull. And it's not a lot of pressure that I'm putting with the tip of my finger, but it's just enough that I'm taking the very top of that repair off. And you want to vary the angles that you come at the repair from. And keep sanding until you get the top of that spot level with the rest of this finish. And it's not going to be perfect because I'm not using a block. But the point is to try to get the repair started and then come back with the block later and finish out my sanding with a higher grit. That spot's just about done. I've got to address this spot, and then I'm going to come back with some 600 grit on a block and wet sand. Then I'll go to 1200 grit on a block and wet sand, and then I can pretty much leave things alone until I go to polishing compound. Back to 600 on a block. You can really feel with your fingers, you're not pushing very hard at all. Really just letting the block do the work. But you can really feel when it stops dragging, the paper stops dragging. And that's pretty much when you're about done with your sanding and can move on to the next grit. Each time you sand with a higher grit, you want to overlap the area you sanded last by just a little bit. So your sanded area gets bigger and bigger each time you do this. But I'm sanding the whole front of the guitar, so it doesn't matter that much. I just want to make sure that I cover each area that I've done with the 600 with the 1200 when I'm done. 1200. I got everything pretty much sanded the way I want it. This repair that's up in here has largely disappeared, but I know that I'm still going to be able to see just a very faint, just, I don't know, maybe the lines that were left in it, because like I said, it was a little dirty when I got to it, and I chased the crack out as best I could. But anytime you've got a void that you can't sand into and you're trying to fill it, you have a chance of seeing some evidence of that void even after I get it all sanded flat. But the nice thing is, when reflections hit this thing in the future, it's not going to show that that scratch, because there will be clear all the way over it and light will reflect off of it. It's just, particularly with this guitar being black, you're always going to notice something was there. I'm not going to address that little divot. I think I'm just going to leave it. I may just barely hit it with a touch-up pen, but got a lot of the scratches out. I'm not going to go crazy on the curves because those scare me, trying to sand on the curve. So I think I'm pretty much done with the front. Thought I would show the process of doweling and drilling and doweling and re-drilling a hole. I've got these strap buttons that were different sizes, and somebody put like a giant hardware store screw in one of them, and I'd like to go back to the more original style screw. The original hardware on this guitar, the strap buttons had a screw with just a little bit of a shoulder on it, where the screw does not have threads, and that's so that when you're tightening down the strap button doesn't catch on the threads. So I got rid of that giant hardware store screw, and I found a similar screw. It's a little bit bigger, but it passes through the hole okay, and it looks right. So they are going to end up being two different size holes, not quite as different as they were before, but that's okay. I didn't have two of those screws, or I would have used two. But anyway, cheap guitar, not a problem. I just want to dowel this. So I've got a couple options. Since that hole is going to have a strap button and a felt covering it, I could go with a relatively large dowel. This is a 3/16. I've got this bamboo skewer that is similar to a toothpick, and I've used these a lot as well. Something seems appropriate on using it on an Asian guitar, but they work really well. I mean, this bamboo, it's lightweight, but it seems pretty tough. The size of these skewers is just about right for the size of that strap button hole down here. I think on the one up here on the upper horn, I'm going to have to use the 3/16 dowel because it's a little bit bigger from that bigger screw. This dowel is just something I picked up at Home Depot or Lowe's, I don't remember, but you buy them in 4-foot lengths, and you can cut them off as you need them. The wood on this, I think, is poplar. It's a hard wood. Poplar's not super hard, but it's a little bit stronger of a repair when you use something like this versus this or a toothpick. Toothpicks are normally basswood or some similar lightweight wood, but any of these that you use will improve a screw's mechanical connection into the wood if the hole's too big. So the process of this is drill the hole to the size of the dowel, a little bit bigger actually if you can. Coat the dowel in wood glue and get it as far into that hole as you can. Then wait for it to dry, cut off the excess, and then I sometimes will make a small finish repair around the dowel where it went in, depending on the hole. And then you're back at baseline, and you can re-drill for your strap button or your whatever hole you're trying to fill. I do it all the time for pick guard screws. Like if I have a wavy pick guard, I'll fill the hole that's causing the wave and then re-drill it and make that pick guard dead flat. Okay, so I mentioned you have to drill a hole that's just barely bigger than the size of the dowel. Well, this dowel I know is 3/16 because it says it. But what is this? We don't know. So get your caliper out. This is about 1/8 of an inch. So I can use standard drill bits here. I don't need to use numbered drill bits. A lot of times when I do use toothpicks, I end up using a numbered drill bit because toothpicks are a lot smaller diameter than standard drill bits. But the point is, you want a tight fit, you want compression, when you put the stick into the newly drilled hole, and you want the wood glue to just take up just the very little space that's left over, if any. That gives you your best bond. Got my holes drilled, everything's all cleaned up. The next step for me is to find the depth of the hole that I just drilled. I could have pre-measured and drilled to a specific depth, but for these holes it doesn't matter. So I usually take a small drill bit and stick it down in the hole. You could use a toothpick or whatever. Just get an idea of how deep that hole goes. Then let's see, that's the 3/16 hole. Then, you know, transfer that measurement over to your dowel rod. And you can take two strategies here. You can either try to cut it exactly to depth and hammer it into the hole and you know, try to make it flush with the surface. That sometimes is a little tough. What I like to do is make the dowel rod a little bit longer than the hole itself, and then I can go in and cut off the excess later. But I don't want to waste a bunch of dowel rods, so that's why I measure in advance. Now to cut this, I find it easiest to just use a razor blade and roll the dowel on a hard surface. I'm sure you can see what I'm doing. Roll the dowel into the razor blade. So it scores it all the way around, and then just snap it in that spot. That's got me a piece of dowel to work with. So I've got my dowel, I've got some glue laid out, and I'm ready to start gluing. The wood glue that I like to use is Titebond. You can use any wood glue, even white Elmer's glue tends to work pretty well for this purpose. But basically, you just want to get your dowel and roll it in the Titebond. Get it nice and coated, and then I'll usually take a toothpick or something like that, skewer, and get some wood glue in the hole itself. Then we're ready to send it home, which is just a matter of starting the dowel in the hole and then tapping it in. Then you want to take the excess glue away as soon as you can. And what's best is to use a wet paper towel if you can to do the final cleanup. Now we'll let that dry, and I'll have to cut off the excess. But I'll do the other string or strap button hole, and I'll be back after that. Okay, so how do I cut off the excess of the dowel? Well, it's pretty much the same way that I cut the dowel to begin with. I'll take a razor blade and just really carefully get up next to the surface and score it as best I can along the base. If you're worried about the finish, you can use the taped one that I've been using for finish repairs. so that it's taped on both sides and won't scratch. Just kind of score it all the way around. I mean, you can put some masking tape here if you care about the finish, but I don't. And you take just a tiny hammer or something, and you can just knock the end of it off. And it usually comes out just below the surface, and that's just perfect. So the one thing I will do on these cracks, or on these fills though, is I'll drop fill that with a little bit of super glue just to make sure that I didn't miss any voids, and it'll also seal the end of the dowel. Then when I re-drill, if any of it's exposed, it'll be covered by super glue. That's pretty much it. So, been doing some final sanding. I got the strap button area all polished up. I got the upper one repaired as well. And then I did a little bit more work on that one spot that I had to color fill. I drop filled that with super glue also, and I got that looking about as good as it can. It was a pretty bad series of cracks, and the super glue didn't wick all the way down into all of them, so there's a little cloudiness and sort of a crackly finish on it, but for the most part it's not showing any bare wood. Now I'm just going to go to my process of buffing, get all this haziness out of the finish from the sandpaper, get it back to shiny again, and I'll show you the start of that, and I will finish up on my own. You've seen this before. I've been using Meguiar's Scratch X. So if something like Meguiar's Scratch X isn't aggressive enough, you can get yourself some other types of machine polishes. I've been using these Brioche's ones from, they're from an auto body, car care supply company. And I think I'm actually going to have to switch to this to get some of these larger scratches out that I wasn't able to sand out. So let me switch to that. Got to get another buffing pad. I don't want to use the same one for two compounds. And then I'll finish all this buffing, and I'll check in with you if I have anything to update. So already I've done half the body with the step 1 polish, and it may not be that simple to tell, but you can see it's starting to bring the gloss back on this side, whereas the wet sanded side is still hazy. And the more that you polish this, the shinier and more perfect it will get. You just have to work your way up through various grades of polishing pads and machine polish, and get those all the way up to where you can really bring some of the shine back. This Meguiar's Scratch X is pretty good after machine polish 1. It's even better after machine polish 2. And you know, it's a really great thing for just removing incidental scratches off of a guitar, just from like picking and stuff like that. But I think wet sanding proved to be a little bit too much for it. At least at 1200. Maybe if you wet sand it down to 2000 or 3000 or something like that, it'd be great. But that's it. I'm just going to finish the rest of the body and then I'll show you the results. Well, I've been at this for a couple hours now. I've got everything really nice and polished out on the top, the back, and the sides. Still a little dust to take care of, but pretty nice, nice and squeaky. And I even polished the headstock. It's not perfect, obviously. Had a little bit of burn through where I had to sand some of those scratches out on the bottom side where somebody didn't want to use a guitar stand for some reason. And then I've got that cracked area. It didn't turn out perfect, but it's not bad. But good news is that one area on the top where I filled that scratch with super glue is really pretty invisible. So overall, I'm happy with it. Just got a little cleanup work to do, and she's about ready to go back together.